The day I stopped believing in the eternal precepts was the day I watched Marcus Webb do something that should have turned him into vapor. Let me back up. My name is Kelvin, and I'm a Draxxian tactical observer. That's a fancy way of saying I watch things blow up and write reports about it. For 300 cycles, I've documented combat scenarios across 17 star systems. I've seen plasma storms that could melt moons. I've watched singularity bombs collapse entire fleets into dimensions that don't technically exist. I thought I'd seen everything. Then the humans showed up. Now, before you think this is one of those stories where I'm going to wax poetic about humanity's potential or whatever, let me be clear. I thought they were idiots. Complete, absolute, weapons-grade morons. They wore armor that looked like it was assembled by blind children. Their ships had decorative flames painted on the hull. Flames. In space. Where there's no oxygen. But Command wanted observations, so I got assigned to their unit during the Keltor Campaign. The Keltorians, if you don't know, are essentially walking nightmares wrapped in chitin and bad attitudes. They've got energy weapons that can punch through 6 feet of reinforced titanium. Their plasma rifles fire bolts hot enough to ignite atmospheric gases. Standard protocol when facing Keltorian assault units is to establish a defensive perimeter, deploy shield generators, and pray to whatever deity you've been neglecting. The humans? They brought sandwiches. I'm not joking. Marcus Webb, the squad leader, was literally eating something called a pastrami on rye when the first attack wave hit. He was a tall guy, built like he'd been constructed from spare industrial parts, with a face that looked like it had lost several arguments with gravity. The kind of human who smiled too much for someone carrying enough weaponry to level a city block. "Kelvin," he said, mouth half full, gesturing with his sandwich toward the horizon where approximately 200 Keltorian warriors were charging across the scorched plains. "You ever try pastrami? It's life-changing." "We're about to die," I pointed out, which seemed relevant. "Probably not," he replied, taking another bite. His second in command, a woman named Riley Vex with hair the color of dying suns and a scar across her jaw that suggested she'd survived something that should have killed her, was checking her rifle with the casual interest of someone inspecting produce at a market. "Kelvin, honey, you worry too much. It's bad for your exoskeleton." "I don't have an exoskeleton. I'm crystalline-based." But correcting human idioms in combat situations feels pedantic, so I let it slide. The Keltorians opened fire at 400 meters. Standard plasma volleys, the kind that had eliminated entire battalions in previous engagements. The air turned purple with ionized death. I activated my personal shield and prepared to write a very short final report. Marcus Webb put down his sandwich. That's when it happened. A plasma bolt, bright enough to burn afterimages into my optical sensors, screamed toward his position at approximately 12,000 meters per second. According to every physical law in the known universe, according to the eternal precepts that the Eldrath had carved into our understanding of reality itself, that bolt should have connected with his molecular structure and converted him into his component atoms. He raised his hand. Not quickly. Not with the desperate speed of someone trying to dodge. Just lifted his hand, palm out, like he was stopping traffic. The plasma bolt stopped 6 inches from his skin. It hung there, spinning, crackling, spitting angry orange sparks into the air around his fingers. The temperature should have been cooking his flesh. The radiation should have been shredding his DNA. Basic thermodynamics should have been writing strongly worded complaints to the universe. Marcus looked at the plasma bolt hovering in his palm with the expression of someone who'd found a mildly interesting rock. "Huh," he said. "These things are heavier than they look." Then he threw it back, not with any device. Not with a gravity manipulator or kinetic redirector. He cocked his arm back like he was skipping stones across a pond and hurled the plasma bolt toward the Keltorian line. It struck their forward shield generator and detonated with enough force to create a small mushroom cloud. Riley didn't even look up from her rifle. "Nice throw. Little to the left, though." "Yeah, I'm out of practice," Marcus replied, picking up his sandwich again. I stood there, all 6 of my sensory appendages trembling, watching Marcus Webb eat pastrami while plasma fire painted the sky around us, and felt my entire understanding of reality begin to crack. The Eldrath had taught us that biological limitation was absolute. That flesh was fragile. That certain thresholds simply could not be crossed without technological enhancement. These weren't suggestions. They were fundamental laws carved into the base code of existence itself. I'd just watched a human catch a plasma bolt with his bare hand. What else had they lied about? The Keltorian assault lasted another 47 minutes. I know because I checked my chronometer approximately 800 times, certain that reality had broken and time had stopped making sense that IT hadn't. Reality was fine. My understanding of it was what had shattered. Marcus and his unit moved through the plasma fire like they were taking a leisurely stroll through a park. Not the cautious, tactical advancement I'd documented from professional soldiers across a dozen species. No, they walked. Sometimes they jogged. Riley actually stopped to tie her boot, while energy bolts that could vaporize steel turned the ground around her into glass. "You know what I miss?" she called out to Marcus over the sound of sustained weapons fire. "Coffee. Real coffee. Not that synthetic garbage they serve on the transport ships." "Oh, absolutely," Marcus agreed, ducking under a plasma stream without breaking stride. "I'd commit minor war crimes for a decent espresso right now." A Keltorian warrior, 9 feet of armored murder, erupted from a crater to their left. Its plasma claws, designed to slice through battle tanks, swung toward Riley's head at speeds that should have made dodging impossible. She leaned backward, letting the claws pass 3 inches from her nose, and shot the warrior twice in the chest. "Rude. We were having a conversation. I need you to understand something. The Keltorians aren't some backwater species with primitive weapons. They've conquered 46 star systems. Their warrior caste trains from birth in combat techniques that have been refined over millennia. They've destroyed fleets, toppled governments, made entire civilizations surrender at the mere threat of invasion." Riley Vex treated them like mosquitoes. Annoying mosquitoes. Marcus had stopped near an overturned transport, using it for cover while he reloaded. I scuttled over to him, my locomotion pods barely functioning through my shock. "How?" I demanded. "Explain to me how you caught that plasma bolt. What technology are you using? What enhancement?" He looked at me with those weird human eyes, the ones with the white parts that made them look perpetually surprised. "Technology? Kelvin, buddy, I just caught it. That's not possible. The thermal energy alone should have combusted your carbon-based tissues. The kinetic force should have shattered every bone in your arm. You should be dead." "Should be, maybe," he said, slamming a fresh magazine into his rifle. "But I'm not. So I guess your math is wrong." Before I could formulate a response to that absolutely infuriating statement, a sound cut through the battle. A low, resonating horn that made my internal fluids vibrate uncomfortably. The Keltorian retreat signal. They were withdrawing 200 of their finest warriors, faced with 12 humans and 1 very confused Draxxian observer, were retreating. Riley walked up, somehow not even breathing hard despite the fact she'd been in continuous combat for almost an hour. That was fun. Short, but fun. Fun. I repeated. The word felt wrong in my translation matrix. "You consider near-death experiences fun?" "Near-death." She laughed, and the sound was bright and terrible. "Honey, we weren't even close to near-death. That was barely a workout." Marcus nodded, finishing his sandwich. Where had he been keeping that? It should have been destroyed in the firefight. She's right. Remember the Sigma Station incident? Now that was near death. "Oh, definitely," Riley agreed. "When the station started breaking apart, and we had to jump between the fragments in hard vacuum. That was intense." "You jumped between fragments of an exploding space station," I said slowly, "in hard vacuum. Without suits." "We had suits," Marcus corrected. "They just weren't, functional anymore. Hull breach in Sector 7. How long were you exposed?" Riley shrugged. 3 minutes? 4. For minutes in hard vacuum should have killed them. The explosive decompression. The freezing temperatures. The lack of oxygen. Basic biology should have deleted them from existence. They talked about it like a minor inconvenience that a communication signal blinked on my tactical display. Command wanted a report. I stared at the blinking light, trying to figure out how to write this. How to explain what I'd witnessed. The Eldrath had given us the eternal precepts 5,000 years ago. They'd mapped the limits of biological possibility. They'd shown us the thresholds that couldn't be crossed, the boundaries that defined existence itself. The humans were spitting on those boundaries and laughing. "Hey, Kelvin," Marcus called, pulling me from my spiral of existential crisis. "You good? You look like you're processing something heavy." "I don't understand," I said, and the words felt like confession. Everything I know about physics, biology, thermodynamics, all of it says what you did is impossible. He sat down on a piece of rubble, his armor scorched and dented, but his expression calm, almost gentle. You know what the problem is with being told something's impossible? You start believing it. And once you believe it, it becomes true. But only for you. That's not how reality works, isn't it? Riley joined him, pulling out a canteen and taking a long drink. Your Eldrath told you there were limits. Hard limits. So you stopped pushing. You stopped testing. You built a nice, comfortable box around yourselves and called it the universe. And humans? I asked. Marcus grinned. And it was the grin of someone who'd kicked down every door they'd ever encountered. We don't believe in boxes. Command didn't believe my report. Can't say I blamed them. I read it back to myself 3 times, and I'd witnessed the events firsthand. A human catching a plasma bolt with his bare hand reads like fiction, like propaganda, like the kind of story you tell to scare children into obedience. But they sent an investigator anyway. A Draxxian high scholar named Terran, who'd spent 4 centuries studying xenobiology and had 17 advanced degrees in fields I couldn't pronounce. He arrived on the next transport, carrying enough scanning equipment to stock a research station. Marcus greeted him with a handshake that made Terran's exoskeleton crack slightly. Sorry, Marcus said, not sounding sorry at all. Sometimes I forget my own strength. Terran spent 3 days running tests. He scanned Marcus with every instrument in his considerable arsenal. Genetic sequencers, quantum resonance imagers, cellular density analyzers, equipment that could map the molecular structure of a target down to the subatomic level. I watched the results come in. Each one more impossible than the last. Marcus's cellular density was 14 times higher than it should be. His neural pathways fired at speeds that should have caused immediate brain death. His muscle fibers had a tensile strength that exceeded military-grade carbon weave. And his DNA, his actual genetic code, was doing things that made Terran's translation matrix glitch trying to describe them. This is wrong. Terran kept muttering, staring at the displays. All of this is wrong. He should be dead. Multiple times over, he should be dead. But I'm not, Marcus pointed out, doing one-armed push-ups in the corner of the medical bay. Which kind of suggests your equipment is broken, doesn't it? My equipment is calibrated to standards established by the Eldrath themselves. Marcus stopped mid-push-up, which was impressive given he was supporting his entire body weight on one arm at an angle that defied several geometric principles. The Eldrath. Those are the guys who supposedly figured everything out, right? The ones who wrote all your rules. The eternal precepts are not rules, Terran said, his voice taking on the tone of a religious devotee defending scripture. They are observations of fundamental reality. The Eldrath mapped the universe itself. They showed us the boundaries of what's possible. Right, Riley said from where she was cleaning her rifle. She'd been quiet during most of the examination, but now she looked up with those predator eyes. Question though, where are these Eldrath now? Terran blinked, which for a Draxxian involves several of our optical sensors rotating in sequence. They transcended physical form approximately 3,000 years ago, ascended to a higher plane of existence. How convenient, she said. They tell you a bunch of stuff about limits and boundaries, then vanish before anyone can ask follow-up questions. They didn't vanish. They ascended through perfect understanding of cosmic law. Marcus stood up, and despite being shorter than Terran by almost 2 feet, somehow made the high scholar take a step backward. And hear me out here, they lied. The silence that followed was the kind that happens right before something important breaks. Lied, Terran repeated, and I could hear his worldview cracking in real time. Why would they lie? Control, I said quietly. Both humans and Terran turned to look at me. I'd been silent during most of this, processing my own crisis of faith, but suddenly pieces were connecting in my mind like a puzzle I'd been staring at for centuries. They told us there were limits because they wanted us to believe there were limits. That's insane, Terran protested, but his voice wavered. Is it? Riley stood, approaching us with the casual grace of someone who'd spent her life doing impossible things. Think about it. You've got all these species, all this potential, and someone comes along and says here's the ceiling. This is as far as you can go. Don't try for more because physics won't allow it. And you all just accepted it. Because it was true. Terran's exoskeleton was rattling now, stress fractures appearing in his certainty. The math worked. The experiments confirmed it. Every test, every measurement, everything validated the precepts. Of course it did, Marcus said, his voice surprisingly gentle. Because you were testing within the boundaries they gave you. You designed experiments that confirmed what you already believed. That's not science, buddy. That's just faith with extra steps. I thought about the plasma bolt. About Riley dodging attacks that should have been undodgeable. About humans surviving vacuum exposure and atmospheric reentry and 1,000 other things that violated every law we'd been taught. So what are you? I asked. If the precepts are wrong, if the boundaries are fake, what does that make humans? Marcus looked at Riley. She looked back. Some unspoken communication passed between them. The kind that happens between people who've survived impossible things together. We're what happens, Marcus said finally, when nobody tells you you can't. 3 weeks later, I submitted my resignation to the Tactical Observation Corps. Terran did the same with the High Scholar Academy. We weren't the only ones. Across the Allied systems, reports were spreading. Stories of humans doing impossible things. Catching plasma bolts. Surviving hard vacuum. Pushing past every boundary we'd been taught was absolute. The Eldrath's carefully constructed limitations were crumbling. Some species panicked. Some went into denial. But others, the brave ones, the curious ones, they started testing. Started pushing. Started asking the question that the Eldrath had spent millennia making us afraid to ask. What if there are no limits? What if we just stop trying? I found Marcus 6 months later on a human colony world called New Bristol. He was teaching a mixed class of humans and aliens something he called parkour, which apparently involved jumping off buildings and calling it exercise. Kelvin, he waved when he saw me, grinning that insufferable human grin. Come to learn how to fly. Humans can't fly. I said automatically. He raised an eyebrow. Can't we? Then he jumped off a 4-story building, tucked into a roll that should have shattered every bone in his body, and landed in a crouch that barely disturbed the dust. You coming? He called up to me. I looked at the edge. At the drop. At every instinct screaming that this was impossible, that the precepts were clear, that I would die. Then I remembered that the precepts were lies, and I jumped. I didn't die. I didn't even break anything. Turns out Draxxian exoskeletons are a lot more resilient than we'd been told. We just never tested them because we'd been taught not to. The Eldrath lied about limits, and the humans showed us the truth. We were never trapped by physics, we were trapped by belief. And belief, unlike plasma bolts, is something you can choose to let go. So what did you think? Did this story surprise you? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this sci-fi story, please hit the like button. It really helps the channel grow. And don't forget to subscribe for more mind-blowing science fiction stories every week. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.